It's all around your belief system, how you think, and that's the way. That's the way that you change things.
I agree.
But it's first knowing or understanding that you are the problem. But you're also the solution.
But I think that's a certain mindset, right? So to me, what you're talking about is, one, the power of self-reflection, being able to see your weaknesses and being humble or open enough to be able to identify that you have these gaps and realize there's things you don't know. And then secondly, there's the accountability piece, and Tony Robbins is very big on that piece of, as you said, perception is reality. Whatever I tell myself is actually what the truth is, and taking that accountability. And I see in a lot of small and medium businesses, whether it's their first business or whether they're been in business a long time, sometimes they really are the reason that they are successful or the reason that they are not going well. They are their best asset and their worst asset. And it's really up to their mindset. But that's not something as a business consultant I can really help or really want to help. It's not my role to come and tell you need to go and work on yourself.
Welcome to QuestX podcast. Today we have an amazing friend, person, a little bit controversial sometimes, but a guru behind investment and what that looks like. Jack Henderson. How are you and welcome today?
Mate, I am good. Thank you for having me here.
Welcome.
Very good. So we decided that we're going to start the podcast with a small game first. So Tanya and I will do that. Tanya did a bit of search online on what a bit of games. She 9-10 hours listening to podcasts and reading and researching, right? So she likes to be very well informed, all right? I know you, we have had numerous of chats that makes that easier for me.
Yeah.
But the game part, she researched on that, and which game we're going to play?
So we're going to do 2 truths and a lie. So you have to tell us 2 things about you that's true and 1 thing that's a lie, and we're going to guess it.
All right, so ready to start?
So I have to tell you 2 things that are truthful and 1 that is a lie.
And we have to figure out which one is the lie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a hard game, because I don't want to sound like a toss-up. 2 things that are truthful and 1 that is a lie. Okay. And I can't tell you what they are, right? I just got to say it.
Yeah.
Okay. When I was younger, I used to lie a lot. I just sold a car and bought a helicopter. And this is hard. This is hard.
It's coming. 1 more.
It's coming. Oh, what's something else? I actually don't think you need to be rich to live in Sydney.
I like that, right? At least we get to the bottom of it. Okay, which one is a lie? Oh my God, can you imagine if that one is a lie? I believe you would have sold the car and got a helicopter because...
That's truthful.
I think that's true. Is it true?
Yeah.
Okay, so I got that
And
right.
I think you would have lied a lot at school.
That's also true.
So the lie is you don't believe that?
Yeah, that's
okay. So we're going to get
Good
ready.
lead-in, right?
Yeah, great lead-in.
Well, thank you for sharing that. We're going to dig into that
That's
a bit
hard
more.
game.
Well, I think sometimes it's just to break the ice and get the audience to understand that we sometimes can come across from a business perspective as a little bit, I don't know if the arrogant is the right way, but we're not actually. And we can have a good laugh and we can have a good conversation.
Yeah.
But we need to know the person before we dig into the business part, right? So tell us a bit more about Jack Henderson.
I'm just a normal guy. That's really me. I am someone who tries to be as authentic as I possibly can. Sometimes that is for the good of or the greater good, and sometimes it is not so good. And there's nothing too much about me. I actually think this is not diagnosed, and I actually dislike when people say, "Oh yeah, I've got ADHD" or whatever it is. But like, I'm someone who needs to do things very quickly. Otherwise, I get bored, and I actually think that's something was very. It was a disadvantage at school because that's not encouraged at school. So I was someone who was very, very bad at school, got kicked out of both my high schools. But now I'm in the business world. It's something that's very good because I don't think through my decision making a great deal. I just sort of like, have this intuitive thing where I weigh up the pros and cons and then I make a decision, and fast decision making in business is good. So, that's Jack Henderson.
Does this pose risks to the business?
Previous to having other people in the business who can like pull me up on my decision making, yes. But I think, the reality is we think we know the outcomes of our decisions before we make them, when the reality is we don't really know the majority of the outcomes and how things are going to unfold. So by just making decisions, you get the feedback loop faster. So that's something that I've been conscious of recently. I'm like, someone asks me something and I actually don't take time to process it. I'm just like, oh, you do that. And then sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. But the good thing is things just happen really, really quickly.
So the shift from school, not particularly being your best part, to today, and I've heard about your journey, but I want to know, how can a person transform from what would have been, I don't know if people told you at the time, was failing at school and using this language quite a bit. Well, now no one can actually say you're failing, right? Because you are successful in your own right.
Yeah.
That transformation, how does it happen? And at what point you would say, you know what, I'm successful?
Well, I still don't feel successful. That's the thing, because every time you get to a certain level where you thought you'd feel like I've made it, then you just look up, and all of a sudden there's all these people above you and you're like, oh shit, I got so far to go. And I feel like that constantly, especially being surrounded by, incredible business people. But I think, what like in school, the issue is what is encouraged doesn't necessarily make you successful. So the things that I used to get in trouble for at school was like, always speaking my mind, being distracting, being loud, being out there, not agreeing with what other people say. Like that's frowned upon in school, and that's a bad thing. So I was told not to do that in school, and then all of a sudden I got into the real world when I got booted from school at 15, and that type of stuff is encouraged. Well, not encouraged, but it's rewarded. The more authentic you are and the more outspoken you are, whether it's good or bad, it gets attention. Yeah. The faster you make decisions, the better it is. And I guess the more that you are confident in your ability and you go and actually do things, as opposed to, abiding by these set of rules like society generally has to. Again, that's what makes businesses, right? Because if you were like, oh, I'm too scared to do that, you'd never start the business or take the risk. And I've just never really had that.
So risk management, what does it mean to you?
Risk management. So I think it's all relative to where you want to go. So we were just talking about Frank before, and I see a lot of people, because he sold his company, like, oh, why are you still working on all the rest of it? And it's like, I think a lot of people think, oh, once I get a certain number or once I get to this certain level, that's me done, and all of a sudden I'll like disappear into the ether and I'll never be seen again. When that's not real, that's not reality. Like the people who think that, that's the reason they aren't where they want to be, is because they have that mindset. So risk to me is like, well, I want to have a multi-billion-dollar international company. So to get to that level, you need to take what would perceive as a lot of risk, right? Yeah. Like, I think when we were at Branson's Island, he had a company go belly up, which was one of the Virgin Orbit or something like that. Yes. I was like, and then I was reading all the articles after we got off the island. I was like, hundreds of millions of dollars going down the drain. But I'm like, you never ever get to a multi-billion-dollar organization if you're not willing to lose that. Yeah. So I just think risk is relative to where you want to go. So,
do you agree with that, Yasser? Because you tend to always have a risk mitigation plan for and surveil for risk in your businesses.
Look, I believe that not taking a risk is a risk itself. Right?
I agree.
You should take a risk, and by acting like you're not taking risks, you're only risking a lot. By calculated risk. I do think that we need to, the better we get at identifying where it could go wrong and have a contingency plan for it, the chance for it going right is a lot higher. So, and that means, do we have the right skill sets in the project? So if I'm running a project and I need to run a financial services, and I'm not particularly a financial guy, then I need to get a financial service guy to help me out. Otherwise, the chances of failing becomes a lot higher. And this is the risk mitigation. The problem happens, I think, when people start applying risk mitigation strategy to the detriment of the project. They start thinking of risk, and then end up doing nothing. That's where I think, the area of difference between a person that makes it in the end, because as Jack said, I agree 100%, you don't make it unless you do something along the way, right? you have to be willing to accept and endorse the losses, and you have to be willing to accept to learn from these losses and find a way to pivot around that to come out on top.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between the 1%ers and the 99%ers, is the ones that just push through the failures and make it in the end. And that's through taking a level of risk. But just calculated risk, in my opinion. Also, how much you have to lose plays a big part of it.
Yeah.
So when you're in a startup phase where what you lose is not particularly significant, your risk appetite tends to be a little bit higher.
Yeah.
The more you have to lose, your risk appetite changes. And that's where a lot of also business come to a point. And you mentioned Frank at that. But you come to a point where a lot of business stop. They get worried. And if you push forward, that's when you get to the billions and bigger and more. So that's my, I have a very high risk appetite, but calculated. I don't do it randomly.
And I also think it's like the skill set you acquire over time
Yeah.
minimizes risk, right? So it's like, you look at Elon Musk, for example, if he lost all of his financial success tomorrow and went to zero, do you reckon he could be back to where he is very close? It's like, yeah, of course, because he's got the skill set, he's got the connections, and all of a sudden you rebuild very quickly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so.
I love that. I love that. So tell me something. When I met you, we've had a very pleasant conversation. And one of the things that I've noticed in that conversation is you ask a lot of questions. What part does this play in success?
So I think I'm just a self-conscious person, which I've developed over time to know when I'm in a room that I'm the smallest person. And if I'm in a room where I'm the smallest person, then I should be asking the most amount of questions, right? Because I've got the most to gain, essentially. Where in my little world in work, like, I run my company and all the people are asking me questions. And I love not being in that environment where I'm, essentially the small person asking the giants all the questions. So I've just always been like that. I just know when I'm in a room where I need to be asking questions, and I make sure I ask as many as I can without being annoying.
And I think that's really powerful. And I had this conversation with someone recently, a close friend of mine who's just starting a business. Storm is who I'm talking about. And she was saying something to the effect of, well, I can't ask you questions because I'm embarrassed that you don't think I'm equal to you. And I've been in business 20 years. She's starting her first business now. She's a family member of mine, And I said almost exactly the same thing to her, that when I started my business, I knew I was the dumbest person in the room. So I took that role. And I asked the questions and I played that role and let everyone else know that I knew I was the dumbest in the room and that they had to teach me. And that your role, you'll only get the chance once of being the new business, of being the startup before you're held to a different standard. And so you have to kind of use that to your advantage and go, right, let's read the room. In my case, I started my first business at 21. I sold it at 27. And I knew that everyone in that room had been in business. Most of them were in their 40s, 50s, 60s and older. I'm usually also was the only woman in the room for many years. And so I have to play, I'm the female in the room. I have to wear that card, and I got to play the young person in the room. Not so much anymore. I'm now 40, but when I was 20. And I think you just have to know where you're at and how to read the room and how to know your place in the room. So if you are one of the senior people, you take that role. And if you are one of the junior people, you take that role. And I think a more senior person is always going to be more grateful to you, more polite to you, more willing to help you if you go in there with, can you please help me? This is the questions that I have for you. What would you do? And show that level of respect, as opposed to going in there and trying to pretend you're equal to them when they're very well aware that you're not, right?
But what you take from it and what you do about it makes it whole different. You can ask all the questions, you can get all the answers, and then you can go home and sleep. I mean, big part of what you do is helping people build wealth through smart means and educated means, correct? And if people listen to what you say and do nothing about it, they don't build the wealth and they don't deliver the outcomes, right? And one of the things, like I remember we spoke about impact and impact investment, and then randomly I get
That's why I've got a goal this year, 12 impact events.
Is that, here
Once
you go.
a month, yeah, we started it last year. Come off the back of that.
So from that conversation, see, that makes me very proud and happy, right? But I remember you sent me a random photo where you went to Oz Harvest, helping them out. And Ronnie Khan will be speaking in QuestX, by the way. And you sent me and said, that feels really good. I remember that photo. You sent a photo when you were helping out.
Yeah.
And you've taken and you've done something about it. And now you're saying you're doing 12 events around impact.
Yeah, we did it last year, and then again, this year. So every month we call them impact events, which is like we donate not money because everyone can go and give money, but we donate a whole team's time. So we go and find one event. So we join the Property Industry Foundation, which is a thing where they help homeless youth. Yeah. We've done obviously stuff with Oz Harvest. We've done stuff with the homeless shelters. We've done stuff with domestic violence victims.
I'm impressed.
Yeah. So
I'm actually impressed from the conversation we had a couple of years ago.
That's how it come about. Yeah.
I'm actually.
I remember
impressed.
You said to me, you can make an impact and make a profit at the same time, or like it was something along those lines.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sitting waiting to go home when we were.
Do you remember that? I remember that conversation.
I remember. Well. So that's where that come from. Yeah. Because again, I didn't even know that thing existed. Yeah. And then you told me about the Blue Ocean Strategy book as well. So. That's not the book you give me, but it's...
No, it's obviously a more boring one now. No, but I love the fact that you're a doer, Jack. And that intimidates people. Do you get sometimes the narrative that you're arrogant because you're a doer? Did you hear that before?
I mean, like... it's like, oh, you have an ego, right? And I always have to pull myself up on that because there is a fine line between having an ego and being confident trying to grow a business, right? Because the reality is I have a business that's big for my age, but like in the grand scheme of business, it's very, very, very small. And creating content and building a brand online, like there's that fine line between being the expert, but then also understanding in the grand scheme of like me versus Warren Buffett or me versus the CEO of Blackstone, I'm not an expert, like I'm this big. So
for now,
yeah, but that's okay as well, right? So, but yeah, I get it all the time. Like these guys. I mean, you've only got to look at some of the controversial stuff that I do, and like the comments are crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. But
so should I live in Sydney or leave Sydney?
So yeah, well, I actually did a follow-up video off the back of that, where I said the other day, you need to, if you're not rich or something along these lines, if you're not rich, you shouldn't live in Sydney. And if you're unhappy about that, then I thought that's the unfortunate reality. The whole conversation, I was essentially saying that just like New York, if you generalize New York, like that's for wealthy people to live there. Like, sure, there are people who are not wealthy who live there, but they don't own real estate there. They rent, and they probably live a subpar life to where if they were to move somewhere else and live somewhere else. Singapore, Hong Kong, all these places that are global cities, like they're cities for the wealthy. So what I meant when I said, if you're not rich, you shouldn't live in Sydney, it's like you can live in Sydney and rent, but like the Sydney that I get to enjoy and the Sydney that I enjoyed growing up are two very different Sydneys. Growing up in Western Sydney, living an hour from the city, paying tolls everywhere you drive, everything being far away, going to the beach was like a holiday, not like a daily thing. Like that's not fun. I moved from Sydney to Newcastle when I was 21 to go and work in the mines. Never really been to Newcastle before, previous to that. And all of a sudden I lived in this regional city where I was a few minutes from the beach, a few minutes from all the cafes and the shops. I earned more money in the role that I was working, and I had less overheads, and I lived a way better lifestyle. So my cost of living was lower, and I had a better lifestyle. And I think a lot of people who live in Sydney and are not rich don't get a Sydney lifestyle. They don't live by the beach. They don't live close to everything. It costs them more and takes them more time to do everything than it does for someone who lives in the city. I don't pay tolls when I go to the office every day. I don't sit in any traffic. I don't have to pay to go anywhere. I walk to the beach. But I didn't have that life growing up. So I think if you earn an average income and you're not someone who's going to continue to grow that and don't need the big city opportunities, then why would you live in a city like Sydney when you can go live? Yeah.
I tend to agree.
The concept makes sense. I mean, I can get how it can.
But if I would have said it like that, it would have got no views.
Well, but you've got a point there. However, people might look at it from a different context. All right, they look at it. Well, it's not their fault that Sydney is becoming that because they've never contributed to the fact that it's expensive. They never contributed to the fact of the quality of it. And they might even blame the government for not stepping up and doing a bit of controls, or the property market is very small at the moment with the amount of migrants coming, and people basically want to live in the main cities. That's causing a problem. And you're coming with a very bold idea of, well, if you want to live quality of life, Sydney's not the place for you,
unless you're rich.
And that is intimidating to people because some people don't find being rich is an important thing.
If I wasn't perceived as being wealthy though, and I was to say that as someone who's poor, it wouldn't come across like that. But it's because it's a rich person saying that is how it's perceived, right? Or if I was a poor person saying Sydney's too expensive, if you're not rich, you shouldn't live here, that'd be supported.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I grew up in Stanmore. My mum's still in Stanmore. Yep. She bought her house maybe for $50,000 before I was born. It's probably worth $3 million now, I would just imagine. And she'll die there. She's never going to live anywhere else. And all my friends lived in Newtown. But some of my best friends live in a 2-bedroom duplex or 2-bedroom. What do they call them when their houses are stuck together? Terraces with no backyard, 3 children in 1 bedroom. And they're paying $1,200, $1,300, $1,500 rent a week. So for me, that isn't quality of life. Well, I'm a teacher by background. So teachers, plumbers, normal everyday jobs.
Yeah, which you don't need to live in a major city for.
You don't potentially, but that's where their support networks are. It's where their families are. It's where their friends are. It's where their work is. That's where their kids go to school.
Yeah.
I moved out of Sydney 8 years ago. I live in Terrigal in the Central Coast. And we then spent 2 years in Perth and we've moved back. And when we were moving back, we had the choice of living in Sydney again. We could have moved to Newtown. We could have moved back to where my friends are. But we decided to go back to the coast because I have 4 children that play a lot of sport, that need to be outside. And we have a very large 6-bedroom house, walking distance to the beach. And for me, that's way more important than being close. And I can drive in an hour and I can drive back out. Right. And it works for me. But you honestly couldn't pay me enough to live back in Sydney now. Like I love where we live. I love our community. My kids have the lifestyle I want them to have. We could move back to Newtown, but then they're going to have to get buses everywhere. We have a huge car. Where are we going to even park that car? I can't even drive down the streets in Newtown because the roads are so thin with our huge car. So it just doesn't work for our lifestyle. And I think it's also about just the stage of life you're at and realizing what's going to work for you. The first apartment I bought my apartment in Elizabeth Street in Sydney when I was 21. It was $325,000 for a 2-bedroom apartment in Elizabeth Street. And I only could afford to live there for 6 months to get the first homeowner's grant. Then I rented it out for years. But there's no way I would want to live there with my kids in the middle of the city. It just wouldn't work for our lifestyle. But it was amazing, and I was immensely proud. And I've listened to some of your content about how proud you were of buying your first apartment at 18. And for me, buying my first apartment at 21 was like a huge milestone and something that still today I'm one of the only ones of my friends that own a house. And we've owned many properties, never got to as many properties as you, but we had a number of properties over the years. And I think it's just about acknowledging the stage of life you're in. But if you are someone that's just moved to Australia, living in a city makes so much more sense than living regionally where you have to commute and you've got all those extra costs to get to employment and work.
The logic makes sense. I think what people maybe sometimes it just rubs them where it hurts. That's where it is.
They're just saying it's entitlement, right? It's entitlement. Yeah. And you're a young white male as well, so you don't have the demographics on your side.
Yeah, and I don't get that either. Like that's another thing. I always see that. I always see that. But it's like Floyd Mayweather is a very wealthy man who's super successful. What does that make any difference if you?
I don't think it makes any difference. And Zero. I've known Jack and never had any feeling.
That's what the controversy is, though.
I think it's more, say that, right? Like it's a choice.
Bad thing. People don't like the fact that the choice is taken away from them from things that didn't influence.
Yeah.
They get upset about it. Yeah. You can understand why. I mean, we had the French Revolution happen purely because of that, right? The whole French ecosystem completely shifted upside down purely because people felt they didn't have a choice over, someone being rich and controlling the lifestyle versus the poor people cannot do it, and they had no choice of being poor. So I think that's what takes it away from them. But I think what you say has complete logic to it, and now they explained it, because when I read the article and I'm like, what is Jack doing now?
But social media and PR rewards controversy. I've been doing content long enough now to know what works and what doesn't work. So if I would have said, guys, if you're not, you should go and live it. It's like no one would care, but it's like you need to have that punch, right? Because it's marketing at the end of the day. If I'm spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on videographers and editors and all this stuff every year, I want to make sure my money goes as far as it possibly can.
So if I don't have a lot of money and I want to live in Sydney, can I make money when I don't have a lot of money?
Of course you can.
So how?
Depends on what your skill set is, right? But if I just talk about my own story, because that's the only one that I can talk on confidently. It's like, if you are an unskilled person, meaning you come here, whether you're a migrant, you move from somewhere, you've just got no skill, like a skill that you'll get paid a lot of money for. You can literally go and be a labourer or a lollipop person or like all of these things and get paid huge money, like more than you'll get paid if you work in an accounting firm, if you're a normal accountant. You can earn $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 a year as a construction worker, which in reality are unskilled. And that's what I did. Not because I chose to. I just, by chance, my dad worked in civil construction and I went and got a job where my dad got a job. And then, like, as you're earning money, which makes life on the day-to-day easier, because obviously people say money doesn't make you happy, but it makes life easier and it makes you not have to worry about money problems. Or worry about money problems less.
Gives you options.
Yeah, that's right. And then you work out what you want to do, which is exactly what I did. I was like, I earned good money, I had low living costs, and I didn't have to, stress about day to day. I could save money, I could buy real estate, I could have a holiday when I wanted a holiday. And then you work out what you like in life. And you're like, oh, I really love real estate, I love sales, I love all that stuff, I love marketing. And then that's what led me down my path. But again, like, not everyone should get into business because most people suck at business. And that's not me saying that. That's the numbers. It's like, I think it's 50% of businesses are out of business in the first 3 years and then the other 25% within 5 years. So most people shouldn't be entrepreneurs because they suck. That's hard. Business is hard.
Certain skill set. Yeah,
that's right. You need to play to whatever you're good at. Yes. I'm not personally a great people manager. I'm very personable. I can build good relationships with people, but like disciplining my staff, for example, I'm very bad at. So I'll let something go for ages just because it's too hard. But then I got a general manager who is incredible at that stuff, ex-CEO of a global company, like very used to managing thousands of people, not 100. And he's very good at that. And I don't have to do that anymore. So that's the awesome thing about obviously being an entrepreneur, which you guys would know better than anyone. It's like you play to your strengths, and then you hire for your weaknesses. And in life, if you're an employee, it's the same thing. It's like you chase a career which plays to your strengths as opposed to...
So how come you come to a point, and my journey is similar to yours, right? We had struggles in the beginning. I had struggles.
Your journey is very cool.
The
way that it come about was awesome. Catching the train and all.
Yeah, you know a lot about my journey. You know a lot. So, but the struggles that I faced in the beginning, at what point... And I don't have an experience into it, but I just want your opinion on it. Mm-hmm. At what point you recognize the fact that you can change the status quo and you do have it in you to succeed and you can make it work? You got it. How do you know that? Because
it's a learnt ability. I was actually going to say this just before when you were mentioning something else. I think it's a learnt skill. If you grew up in a household where everything's a struggle, life's hard, that's the narrative you get told, that's the story you tell yourself. Forever. Whether it's true or not, that's the story you tell yourself. So to get out of that, you need to learn how to think different. Mm-hmm. So I heard a guy talk last year at a mastermind I was at. His name is Derek Sivers, and he wrote a book called Useful, Not True. And I've been doing personal development shit for years, but this is something that I literally listened to this guy's talk, and I went back to my hotel room for 2 hours and just absorbed all this stuff because I had like this breakthrough. I was like, fuck, there's so many things. In short, the thing that he teaches is like we walk around in our lives, every single human on this earth does it, and we have these beliefs that we think or we believe are factually true, when in reality, it's not truth, it's just your belief. And he ran through all these different scenarios. I highly recommend the book or try and find a talk on YouTube or whatever. And it's like everything in our life is just simply a belief. There are very few things that are actually factually true or like proven by physics, right? It's like... Everything is a belief. Yeah. So, and I'm now a part of Tony Robbins' mastermind because off the back of that, I was like, I need to learn more about this shit. So I joined his platinum group, and it's the same thing. Like it's all around your belief system, how you think, and that's the way that you change things.
I agree.
But it's first knowing or understanding that you are the problem, but you're also the solution.
I think
you just have to pay attention.
You just have to go like, my life is shit because of me. Yeah. And even if it's because of my parents or whatever, it's like, at the end of the day, it's you. So if your life is shit and is not how you want it to be, if you want the jets and the cars and all the rest of it, or you want something else, like...
something about it.
You can go and, you can get it, you know? Yeah. But that's where it starts. And for me, it was like I got kicked out of school. I lied a lot in school, like I said earlier. I wanted to be rich, and my family wasn't rich. We weren't poor, but we weren't rich. I didn't have the wakeboard boat on the river, which I thought was like what rich people did when I grew up. We didn't have a Land Cruiser. We didn't live in the house that I wanted to live in. And I used to lie about that stuff because I wanted it and we didn't have it. And then I'd always get caught out. And then when I got kicked out of school, all of a sudden my life and financial decisions were in my own hands because I earned my own money. I could make my own decisions and I didn't need to listen to it. And then all of a sudden that's how I got into investing and all the rest of it. Yeah.
But I think that's a certain mindset, right? So to me, what you're talking about is one, the power of self-reflection, being able to see your weaknesses and being humble or open enough to be able to identify that you have these gaps and realize there's things you don't know. And then secondly, there's the accountability piece. And Tony Robbins is very big on that piece of, as you said, perception is reality. Whatever I tell myself is actually what the truth is, and taking that accountability. And I see in a lot of small and medium businesses, whether it's their first business or whether they're been in business a long time, sometimes they really are the reason that they are successful or the reason that they are not going well. And I help people. I'm a business consultant, mostly with disability providers.
What you do. Yeah, I was going to ask a question after the podcast.
I'm a business consultant helping disability providers.
Right.
So people like TLC is one of my clients.
Great clients.
Great client, yes. And what I see in a lot of my clients, so I've helped about 10,000 people, 10,000 disability providers over the last 10 years. And what I see in them is they are their best asset and their worst asset. And it's really up to their mindset. But that's not something as a business consultant I can really help or really want to help. It's not my role to come and tell you need to go and work on yourself. But I see that the symptoms are different. The symptom might be not enough profit, might be staff turnover, might be whatever it might be. But actually the problem, the root cause is actually their mindset, their way they're leading, their lack of knowledge. But it's hard to take that on board. You just walk in and go,
hey, so the reality is you suck.
You suck. Yeah. I just refer them to Yasser, and then Yasser can have the hard conversation.
I think I'm very pleasant. It's a debatable discussion.
Yeah.
But I think if you ask me a question, if you go and tell me, am I doing it well or how should I do it, I'm going to tell you exactly what the truth is and not what you need to, it's not, I'm not going to make it pleasant, all right? I'm going to make it honest. And that might sometimes intimidate people and might sometimes upset people. But if I'm going to worry about upsetting you, then I don't really care about you. If I need to worry about you listening to the clear message that will help you then make a difference and change what you need to change to deliver the outcomes you need to deliver. And I can put a smile on my face, but you're going to hear it exactly how it is. That's the approach.
I know, because in my first business advisory board committee I put together and asked you to join, you made me cry in the first meeting. So.
Apparently. She asked me the question, what do you think? I said, it's rubbish.
He told me. He absolutely told me.
She goes to me, this is the idea. What do you think? No. I said, terrible.
It was terrible, yeah.
And she was like, okay. I said, don't ask me if you don't want to hear the truth.
Yeah. I personally, I had a coaching call, my first coaching call with Tony's team yesterday, and I said to the coach, I'm like, hey, I don't want you to sugarcoat anything. If I suck or I say I'm going to do something and I don't do it, don't be like, oh, you've had a busy few weeks. I get it. It's like, you fucking said you were going to do this and you didn't do it.
Yeah.
So you're the issue. That's I personally.
Look, we're still friends, right? We're sitting here. We're still friends. It's fine.
For the right reasons. I have no gain or interest other than your interest. If I say it as it is, that should be taken as an appreciation thing.
Yeah.
Because it is a good thing. The fact that business, we say always there's 1% leaders in the world and 99% followers. And when we say 1% leaders, we're talking about the actual decision maker leaders in the spaces they're in, right? Yeah. The big boys that come in and the word is gold and it changes industries, it changes share markets, that kind of stuff. And the followers, it can be managers and CEOs, they still can be followers in the ecosystem created. If you want to be part of the leaders, don't do what the followers do. Change your mindset and become that leader. Become bold, become clear, become honest, know exactly what you need, set the goal, work towards the goal. Don't stop until you achieve the goal. And tap into mentors, advisors, and coaches or people that can help you with their experiences to help you to get there. Now, if you want to sugarcoat it, then find someone else.
That's right.
I'm not the guy.
And if you aren't that person, I think understanding that being the second employee at Facebook, you still did really well, right? Or any large organization or any organization, there's the founder and then there's all these people who are 2 and 3 and 4 and are making incredible money, have way less risk. And they're, again, self-aware people who go, I probably could do this by myself, but would I be as successful? Probably not. I enjoy being a part of a company and a culture. Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with it. I
don't think at all.
I mean, we need it all for it to work.
The second employee of Facebook's way richer than me, and he never started nothing.
Yeah, true.
But all of this, what we're really talking about, standing out in a crowd, doing things differently, is really back to your philosophy of the flamingo strategy.
Yeah, I just coined that strategy.
Talk us through what that is. What does that actually mean to you?
So it means a few things. It didn't start as like a property strategy. It started off where I was in Europe, just a 21-year-old alcoholic, and I had this hat that I bought off like this side stand in Croatia, and it was a big wide brim hat that had flamingos on it. I'm pretty sure it was a women's hat. And every day I'd just like do an Instagram story. And this is when I was still working in the mines. I had like 500 followers or something. And I just blind drunk going, oh, it's Flamingo Mondays. Anyway, I got back to Australia. And then people were like, and when I say people, like 10 people were like, oh, when are you bringing back Flamingo Sundays? And that's where the flamingo thing come from. Oh. And then I was like, the more I thought about it, I was like, fuck, the flamingo's so true, right? It's like, if you look at all the birds out there, like a flamingo is one that stands out out of every bird. Like, would you rather be a pigeon or would you rather be a flamingo? And then I was like, oh, well, if you think about it, like the kind of real estate we buy are flamingos because there's a lot of shit and there's flamingos which are great assets and they're the ones you want to buy. So that's how it all started. And then I wrote a kid's book called Henderson, the property flamingo, and he helps us, a family of lions in the jungle. Yeah, we just give it to our clients when they sign up. Anyway, that's where it come from. So
I love it. I think it's great.
That's cute.
Yeah,
I didn't think you have a cute story behind all of that, but I think it's
it started off with me just being young and drunk in Croatia, but anyway, it turned into a business thing now, and now it's like our mascot is Henderson, which is the property flamingo, and it's all around standing out from the crowd. And again, being a part of the 1% versus the 99%.
I love that. So one of the things that fascinated me about you when I met you, and we're friends now, but when I first met you, I didn't know who you were, right? And
the one thing you had sick watches. I was like, fuck, what's this guy literally, I was like, dude, what's this guy do?
But the one thing I really paid attention to is how disciplined you were. It was you and Frank, to be honest. You had a dual discipline thing that was out of the normal, right? And one of the biggest stories that when we went for the bike ride was Richard Branson. We ended up looking for you everywhere on the island because you decided to go for a run for 7Ks or something.
I was 21.
21Ks.
Well, I didn't know I had to stop at the top of the hill where everyone else stopped. I just kept running.
We kept running. So he disappeared. We got worried. We're looking for him. And
they got that worried that they left the island and left me there. And the only one who stayed there was Frank.
I didn't know him well. Now I know him well.
I was like, where is everyone?
Actually, Richard said,
I had no water.
He'll be fine.
So hot.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure Richard actually said he was probably going to get kidnapped and we'll get a phone call soon and they'll want us to come and get him. That's actually what he said. I'm not kidding.
That's hilarious.
I didn't get kidnapped, but I was okay.
I was there when that happened. I was definitely there. But you were fine. I
was fine, yeah. So, I just thought I was going for a run.
The discipline behind your habits, even the fact... I know you wake up extremely early. You go for your runs. I know you do your... tell me more about that because it is extreme. And when you tell me I'm young and drunk, you're still young. I'm not sure about drunk because I know you don't
I don't drink that much anymore, yeah.
So, but the change is significant. The habits are completely different because I know you go to bed like 8 o'clock at night or something.
Yeah, 8:30ish, yeah.
You know? So, and you switch off. Like I can't... If I call you at 9 o'clock, I will not be able to get hold of you. You completely switch off. The discipline behind that is unreal, I think. Tell me more. How did you get from wild all over the place to literally extremely disciplined?
I think it's like, I'm like a personality type, which is all or nothing, right? So like when I drink, the reason I don't drink a lot is because when I drink, it's like not just like 3 or 4 drinks. It's like you'll see Jack in 2 days' time. That's the reality. And that's why I stopped. I had a coach at the time and I said, what's going to change my business? And he said, get off the piss. And I was like, okay, another example of like listening to what someone who I'm paying was telling me. And then my business tripled that year from not drinking and staying sober. And then when you channel that energy that you would put into usually bad things and then spend 3, 4, 5 days recovering and then getting back to where you're at, into the other side of it, which is health and, that's just what happens. And then, people like David Goggins, for example, it's like badass. And I'm like, I want to be more like David Goggins.
I love David Goggins.
Yeah, so that's it. It's just like I'm inspired by these types of people. Now I just love like how far can I push it. So I did my first 200-mile run week before last. Again, because I read David Goggins' book and he did a 205-mile run. And I was like, fuck, That's so
gotta beat that.
Like, oh, if David can do it, I can do it. Yeah, but it all starts small, right? Like that's the thing, whether it's property and investing, whether it's business, whether it's like health and fitness. Like when I started to run, I could literally not run. I lived in Bream Street, Coogee, and I couldn't run to South Coogee and back, which is a 5K loop. I couldn't run one way without stopping and walking to get my breath back and then starting again. Because I was like a gym junkie before that, right? I was all about pushing weights, even though I don't look like it now. And then you start, and then I'm one of those people who, when I start something, I stick with it. Like that's the discipline of like.
It sounds like you know what it takes to get there, and you're willing to do the work.
Only because I've listened to other people say consistency and doing something for a long period of time is what gets you. That I'm like, okay, if that's all it takes, I can do that.
But it worked.
Yeah, well,
and that tells you people's experiences do matter, and if we don't pay attention to them, we probably will not achieve what we want to achieve.
Yeah, and you hear it like of everyone says like do something for a long period of time, stay focused, stay consistent, and then you'll beat 99% of people just because no one else can do that simple thing. Like even if you suck, you'll still win. I'm like, I suck at most stuff. And like content's another great example of that. When I started my Instagram account, I had like 1,000 followers, say. You know, I've got like 130, almost 135,000 now on Instagram. Like none of those are bought. That's just organic. For 6 years, I've been posting 3 to 5 times every single day. Then TikTok, then LinkedIn, then YouTube. Like, but when I first started, no one knew who I was, and the people who did know who I was thought I sucked. And now, like, less people think I suck, but still a lot of people think it.
Well, you have a controversy to the way you present yourself, but I like it because I talk to people a lot about the concepts you do, and I'm a person in business. I'm exposed to a lot of big businesses, a lot of people in that investment space. Like, I get it. And when I look at it, I'm like, you know what? This is just really how it needs to be said. You know, sometimes we just try to avoid the conversation of being bold about this is how I did it, this is what happens, this is what I am, this is where I am, versus, you know, if you work hard and persistence and you might make it here and you just focus on the goals while you say, no, I invested that much money. I got that much money. This is how I did it. If I want to drive an expensive car, I want to live in a nice house, that's how I need to do it. This is how you need to do it. Otherwise, don't even ask the question.
And if you're not rich, don't live in Sydney.
well, absolutely.
Well, there's just so much noise out there, right? Like
cut through.
Content now is crazy. Everyone has a podcast. Everyone produces reels. If you're the same as everyone else, like if you're like the 99% of people now who produce content, like you'll get 10 views per post.
Yeah. You're not interesting anymore.
So, and then you learn the game, you know, like it's like anything. You learn.
So you pivot
constantly, you know, and like I did a post the other day, this is off topic from what you just asked me about before, but I did a post the other day, and I spoke about if you're under 30, I don't think you should have kids because it's a bad idea for your financial future. Not because it's not a good thing to do personally. Like I don't care about any of that shit. I'm just simply talking about if you have kids before the age of 30, it's not good for your financial future for most people. It's bad. But I started that post off with the hook with saying having kids before the age of 30 is the dumbest shit that you can ever do for your financial future. Now, anyone who has kids is going to be offended by that. Yeah. And if you read the comments, it was crazy.
Yeah, of course.
But again, like, the hook made it sound like I'm an arrogant piece of shit. It's what got attention. It got, I don't know how many views. It was crazy, the amount of views. A lot of people agreed. More people disagreed with me. But I honestly believe that. Like, if you're a normal, couple growing up, trying to find your feet, you just get into a good role, start earning good money in your early to mid-20s. Then you have your first child. You go back to one income. You're still renting, all that stuff. Like, that isn't good for your financial future. Whether it's not good for other things, like that's amazing. If you're optimizing for happiness and all the rest of it.
Prioritize, you choose.
Yeah. But just that felt like it was controversial. It's truly what I believe. I'm under the age of 30 and I don't have kids. But because of the way I said it, you know. And you're a mother of 4, you said, right?
Yep.
So that would probably piss you off if you saw that.
No, I wouldn't. No, I owned my own house at 21. So I'd sold a business before I had my first child.
You hustled.
I hustled to make sure that my children weren't going to interfere with my financial future or the future that I wanted for them. But I don't think that that's the same for everyone. And I do. I was talking to a friend the other day. She's 43 years old. She's never been out of the country. And I was like, how have you never, like, she's like, I don't have a passport. And I think I was flying to Japan the next day for my birthday. And she was like, I've never been overseas. And I was like, how old are you? She's like, 43. I was like, how does that happen? She goes, well, I had my first baby at 15 and I've had 4 since. Crazy. And I've never left the country. And I was like, world's best mum. That's amazing. But get a passport and let's go somewhere. Like, please, I'll take you.
Choices. And I think The point is, the choices you make will impact the outcomes you receive.
Yeah.
Don't expect to have a financial freedom at a high level if you made that choice. I don't think you're trying to people not to have kids. You're trying to people, if you made the choice to have kids, then you might struggle with the financial freedom part.
Yeah, or young, you'll struggle with it while you're young.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you won't have kids in your 20s. You know, kids are growing up when you're in your late 30s, early 40s, and then you go and make $1 billion after that.
Correct.
That's amazing. But all I do is I share my opinions and thoughts and experiences, and I share them in a way that gets attention.
Yeah.
And being divisive in this world we live in is very, very important, I think. Yeah.
So if you're gonna give someone a sense of experience for you, I mean, that can impact your business. Think of it, you get followers, you get likes, you get people watching. Mm-hmm. I get that, but not always particularly agreeing. All right.
Most disagree. Yeah.
So, but at the same time, there's a component of it that you want to grow your business, right? You are a businessman.
That's the only reason I do it.
Correct?
Literally, it's the only reason I produce content.
But if that pushes people away,
yep,
it means you're only attracting the right people, or you're only attracting the people that agree with you so they can actually endorse your methodology.
Yeah, so like any business, right, there's a certain demographic that we serve. For example, Jack Henderson, young, white, male versus middle-aged Indian man. I'm not going to attract Indian clients like a middle-aged Indian man will attract Indian clients with certain beliefs, right? But that Indian guy is not going to attract the clients that I attract. So everyone has their own demographic of person. And the more content that I produce for my niche, the more that I dominate that niche. And that's something that Alex Hormozy taught me, which is in Australia, it's slightly different to the US because a niche in the US could be as big as our population here in Australia. But it's just like dominating your niche and then that's essentially your moat around your business, right?
Absolutely. Give me 5 names that inspired you.
At different points in time. So first one was Chris Gray, mentor of mine, still a very good friend, still very inspiring, but he got me on this path. And he was a guy that was in his early to mid 40s, wealthy, had zero benefit in helping Jack Henderson, but he did it anyway, which I love. Gary Vaynerchuk, which was like a digital mentor, I call them, got me obsessed with content. I followed everything that he said. That was why my first hire was not an EA or a sales associate. It was a videographer when I first started my business. Alex Hormozy is probably the guy I follow the most now from a business point of view. So I've done, his workshops and I'm now a part of his mastermind. Tony Robbins, obviously, I think he's the GOAT of that personal development space. And
absolutely.
It's a bit, rah-rah for a lot of people, but rah-rah gets results.
Absolutely.
And then there's just so many that are inspiring at different points, right? Being on Richard Branson's island, surrounded by people like yourself, is super inspiring because I never would have met those kinds of people if I wasn't there. You read books like that one I mentioned with Derek Sivers. I met him once. I had him on my podcast after that, and it's just that one thing is just change the course of your life because it flicks something in your brain. You're wow. Yep. So there's lots of little moments like that compound over time.
You know what's the theme I'm hearing in everything you say is how much you pay attention to these winners, that you actually
do the work.
I think that's fascinating. The amount of people that listen to, experiences of others and they do nothing about it. It's significant, but you actually do something about it every single time.
I try, yeah. I try.
But that's power. That's power. And that's success. And that's why you're delivering outcomes. Yeah, I mean, your business is about outcomes. It's an outcomes business. If you don't give the outcomes, your business...
There is no business.
Right? It's all outcomes based. And if you don't deliver these outcomes for yourself, then how are you going to deliver it for your clients?
Yeah.
And I can see the consistency in the language you're using. And I'm loving that, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, and I always give everything a go. So, which again is a learnt skill. Where in school, it's failing is bad. You're nervous to start anything, and failing is just not winning, right? If you come third in a race or fifth in a race, you still haven't won, so you don't get all the recognition. And school is that teaches you not to do that. But if you then have that sort of mindset and mentality in life, then you'll never do anything. So I've always been someone who's just oh yeah, I'll do it. With the running, for example, it's just I just say yes and then I work it out. Say yes to a race, work it out. So many things.
Did it ever go wrong?
has it ever gone wrong? Probably I'll rephrase that. Has there been times where I haven't done as well as I thought I would do? Absolutely. But it's never gone wrong as such because you learn so much and you grow through it. Like I went skydiving in New Zealand last year and I'm petrified of heights. Like I'm not a guy who would get on something and like wig out, but I'm not someone who like goes into that adrenaline shit. And I was like, I went to New Zealand the year before with my girlfriend and there was the big bungee, the biggest one in the Southern Hemisphere, whatever it's called, Nevis. I was like, holy shit, that thing is wild. And I was like, I'm never doing that. And then I went with my parents last year and I was like, oh, Dad, will you do this bungee with me? And he's like, yeah, let's do it. And I honestly like had the worst sleep 2 nights prior to it because I was so nervous. I'm so nervous. Oh, it's just scary for no reason. I don't know why it's scary. But then Dad and I went, he jumped first. I did the second thing. And like, it seems so small, like a bungee jump, big whoop. But like just the fact of having ultra nerves and then actually doing it, realizing it wasn't that bad, and then going on with life. It's just like David Goggins says, putting another cookie in the cookie jar. And it's just like all those little things where even though it's a completely different experience to say business, it's the same feeling. It's the butterflies. It's the overcoming of like not wanting to do something, doing it, realizing it wasn't that bad. And then again, it's that learnt skill of constantly going and pursuing that as opposed to walking the other way going, oh, that's scary, so that's a bad thing.
And it also sounds like you love the journey of mastery as well. You love when you weren't good at something and then you do the work and then you are good at something and you can look back and go, actually, I did it. I can do it. And now what's the next thing? Because that thing that everyone said was hard, done.
Yeah, that's right. And it doesn't mean it wasn't hard either. It was just like, I did it.
I've done it. Now what?
And then you also, that's the awesome thing about social media, right? It's like when you share those things, you get rewarded for it. So you're like, I didn't do more of that shit.
Oh, God. I need to get better at social media. Mine is...
I tell you that all the time.
You're doing well. You do. I see your stuff. So that's a good thing.
You're a fan and a friend. You're a fan and a friend. So if you're going to ask, and I did that with Tanya, because you don't know Tanya. If you're going to ask someone you don't know, so Tanya is someone you've never met before, what would be the one question you would ask her?
Like in a normal environment?
Yeah.
First thing I'd say, hey, what's your name? Or I'd be like, hey, I'm Jack, what's your name? And then you'd probably say, my name's Tanya. And I'm like, oh, I don't know, if we were at an event or something, I'd be like, oh, what brings you here? And then you have a conversation.
So that's the curiosity. Because people sometimes fail or struggle to break the ice to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
With people they don't know.
Sales has taught me that. Because like coming out of construction and mining, you're not like having conversations with randoms, right? You're like on a job site and that's your life. And outside of work, you associate with people that you grew up with. And then when I moved into the real estate sector, it's like the whole game is speaking to randoms. Yeah. And I had to, again, it's a learned skill. So the first time I did a cold call was terrible. But when you do 25,000 of those things in a year, you become a little bit better. And that teaches you how to talk to strangers. When you know how to cold call, it's like you're calling someone who probably doesn't want to hear from you. Yeah. You got to have the right tonality so they're not like, never call me again. And you got to ask questions that, doesn't seem like you're an intrusive pig.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And that's how I learned. So for anyone listening, really good guy to follow is Jeremy Lee Minor. I'm not sure if you've seen any of his stuff. He has a company called Seventh Level. And it's just like a really human approach to sales. How to ask questions, the tonality you use, how to, yeah, anyway.
I love that. I love that. So
I think I've asked or had all my questions answered. Yeah, I did a lot of prep work and a lot of research, but I think you actually answered all of my questions now. I guess the only other question that I had was coming back to QuestX is what can we expect you to speak on at QuestX, and why should someone come and listen?
That's a very, very good question. I want to bring the most amount of value I possibly can. So who's going to be like the ideal demographic?
Audience. So we're targeting. So you came to our last year's one, which was more heavy on impact. Now there's a slight change to that. Impact is still a piece. There's
a lot of people there.
614 people. We're aiming at 700 to 1,000 this year.
Wow.
And we're doing slightly. So we did heavy on impact. This is going to be a component of impact and heavy on inspiration around business and helping people to walk out of the inspired to either do business and succeed in it, and the methodology of doing that. And you can start from nothing and become something, because most of us have.
Yeah.
Versus you don't have to always be a business person, but you can walk away inspired by the journey, so you can go back to your work and do well in what you're doing currently. The demographics is going to be community organizations, government officials, and high net worth people. And that's something I'm trying to combine constantly in our conferences, because I think it's a rare occasion when they combine in the same room. So if I can have that as a constant thing, we can then create an inspiration from the high net worth people into what happens in the general community, and vice versa.
Yeah, so I don't think it'd be a property investing thing that I'll talk about, because that's going to be pretty boring, right? Probably more about, Leah, like what I've spoken about today. Business growth comes from personal growth.
I think your journey and your brand, I think that would be interesting.
And probably, I think when you talk really specific about a certain thing, it lands more than just general chit chats, because people like come away with like understanding a little bit about it, but not like getting a lot of deep knowledge on a certain topic. So, I think that's what I'll talk about.
Perfect.
But deep.
And we want deep. We want deep. A little bit of controversy, but without intimidating the audience.
All right, everyone, put your hand up if you're not rich.
What kind of Sydney? No Sydney one. It's going to be a Sydney event, so I should be careful.
Yeah.
No, I love that. And thank you.
What would you guys like me to talk about? What do you think is going to bring the most amount of value? You said I can ask questions.
Of course you can. Look, I think...
You know your audience better than anyone, naturally.
Look, I genuinely think that people understanding the concept of you can build a platform of success through multiple things. One of them is investment, business, but also learning from someone's journey. They're very powerful. And I think if you can combine this in a very strong presentation, people walk away understanding you can touch everyone in the room. The people that just want to invest, because some people don't have a little money, but they have some money. Some people don't even know how to invest in superannuation money, and they keep it just running behind the scenes. While they can take this $500,000 sitting in and they can turn it into a multi-million-dollar by having someone just guide them through the process. These little things, but tapping into also the impact side, that you can still, while in the context of things, do the impact events that you're doing, and having these conversations about, building wealth helps families as equally. Helps stability, that kind of stuff. So I think if you tap into this, and your journey is a classic example for that. I mean, when you start talking about your journey, it's a storytelling for you. It's a lot of learning for the audience, because when you come out of school and have no idea where you're going to go, and when you come out of school have no idea what the future looks like, and suddenly you pay attention and you change things, you change habits, you discipline yourself, you change, you listen to people that guiding you to get the right things done, and you do it. I think that's very inspiring. If I would walk out of there and think, oh my God, I can actually change little things. You said to yourself, I stopped drinking alcohol and suddenly I tripled my business.
It's true.
It's big.
Yeah.
I think for me, what has been most impressive for me talking to you is this idea of being in charge of your future and setting your life on a trajectory to reach the goals that you have, and finding a way through whatever the challenge might be to where you want to be. So it's kind of that determination, that never saying no, that not, looking for a solution, and also that vulnerability in knowing you don't have the answers, and that you need other people on this journey. So I think if I was in the crowd, I would want to hear about your journey, where you came from, where you are today, but with some practical advice around things like what I've learned from you, if I was to recap it, is that you're very big in education, in accountability, in learning, in growing. And I guess, how do you use those things to create wealth? How have you specifically used your mindset and your skill set and put those together to take you to where you are today?
Will you hear all that and more?
I love it.
Fantastic. Great. I'll write you. I'll write it for you too.
I'll bring the energy, don't worry.
Definitely.
I'll wear the red hat.
So we're launching next week, and then we can share some of these and just support the conference. It's going to be powerful. I
really appreciate you guys allowing me to be a part of it.
Yeah, thanks for being part. It's been really fun.
Thank you.
Jack Henderson, thank you
now to get the big dog on the podcast, Frank. Very fun.
Thank you for being part of QuestX podcast.
Thank you, guys.
And we're looking forward to the conference. Thank you.
Amazing.